It's June 27, 1976. A plane departs Tel Aviv carrying 246 passengers, most of whom are Jewish. Now, after a stopover in Athens, Greece, where more passengers board, two hijackers also join the flight. Now, minutes after takeover, the plane is seized mid-air. Originally bound for Paris, it's diverted first to Libya and then to Entebbe, Uganda. This audacious act of terrorism would ultimately lead to a daring rescue operation by the Israeli commandos, which would come to be known as the Operation Entebbe. In this episode of Uganda in History, we dive into the gripping events that unfolded leading to the raid on Entebbe Airport to rescue the Israel hostages. It was a daring mission that underscored Israel's staunch stand against the wave of constant terrorist attacks against its citizens. It's January 1971. The tropical heat pressed heavy over Kampala and the whispers filled the barracks. General Idi Amin, a towering figure known for his imposing presence and ruthless efficiency, caught a wind of a dangerous plan. Now, the president, Apollo Milton Obote, was away in Singapore at a Commonwealth summit, and he had intention that left Amin with no doubt. Arrest was coming, and the charge was misappropriating army funds. Now, for Amin, this wasn't just any political maneuver. It was a threat to his power, his freedom, and his life. But Amin wasn't alone to wait for that fate to knock on his door. Now, while Obote discussed politics half away the globe, Amin acted with precision that would mark the start of one of the most controversial eras in the history of Uganda. Now, as the sun rose on January 25th, troops loyal to Amin swarmed into Entebbe International Airport, locking down any chance of intervention or escape. Now, Kampala, the heart of the nation, fell silent as military vehicles rolled through its streets. Now, soldiers surrounded Obote's residence. Their boots thundered around the gravel as they sealed every route in and out of the city. Now, major roads once very busy with morning traffic became empty, blocked by military might, and Obote's government had been overthrown. The accusation was corruption and favorism towards the Lango people who came from the Lango region. But the people, uncertain yet curious, took to the streets to celebrate the fall of Dr. Apollo Milton Obote's government. But this wasn't any just ordinary day. Soon, the quiet hesitation gave way to cheers as news spread over Kampala, erupted into a mixed surprise and celebration.
The members of the Uganda Army and Air Force decided to take over from the civilian role because of the last arrangement which were made by the Dr. Apollo Milton Obote to disarm the all tribe of Uganda except his own tribe Langi and Acholi. And also, that is the point which brought all this problem.
Now, Israel as a country had begun forging relationships with Uganda as early as the 1950s, played a surprising role in Idi Amin's early days. Now, when Uganda gained independence, Israel was quick to invest in the young nation, donating resources that ranged from agricultural assistance to military equipment and training. It was no secret that Israeli intelligence had supported Amin's military endeavors, even aiding him in setting up the dreaded State Research Center, a secret police force that would become infamous in the years to come. But this fragile alliance was shattered in March 1972 when Amin turned to his former allies. With an announcement that shocked both his ministers and the international community, Idi Amin Dada ordered that the expulsion of the Jewish community and Israeli personnel from Uganda by March 27, 1972 would take place. Now, the Uganda Argus, a newspaper in Uganda at the time, reported that the government had informed David Lau, the Israeli envoy to Kampala, of this directive. Now, all Israeli trainers, military agents, and paratroopers had to leave the country immediately. Idi Amin justified this decision with a sharp word, claiming that it was driven by the desire to free Uganda from the chains of imperialism. Ministers were instructed to draw up a list of all Jews residing in the country. Now, the trust that had existed between Israel and Amin had dissolved almost overnight, leaving the country to navigate its next step, more unpredictable and a chapter alone. Now, the ripples of this expulsion were felt deeply. signaling not just a shift in alliances, but the start of Idi Amin's increasing erratic and brutal rule.
I came so close to the Arab because Arab found that I am most influential leader in Africa, in the continent, and also I am a leader who speaks the truth.
Did your Muslim religion take part into your choice of the Arabs?
It is not because of the Muslim, because the people who broke relationship with Israel, they are not only Muslims, they are Christians, but they have seen the truth, and everybody listen for me. And even in OAU, if I don't speak, every leader try to ask why, and I must speak like in a non-aligned conference in Algeria. I was not feeling well, I did not speak, but 15 minutes before the conference closed, I was brought to come and give a speech. I gave very good speech, including Castro broke relationship with Israel after my speech.
Now, the 1970s was a tumultuous time marked by more than just bell-bottom pants and disco music. It was an era of terrorism that surged globally when groups like the Red Army faction in Germany, the Japanese Red Army, and various gangs that made headlines with their violent acts. Now, with each day passing by seemed to cast a darker shadow over the world as these groups carried out attacks that sent shockwaves of fear and uncertainty across the nation. Now, in 1972, the world watched in horror as the violence reached a global stage during the Olympics in Germany. Now, 8 Palestinian militants infiltrated the Israelis' Olympic team's quota, taking 11 members of the team hostage. Now, the operation was aided by the West Germany's neo-Nazi group, who provided logistic support to the militants. Now, the captors belonging to the Black September group demanded the release of the Palestinians and the non-Arab prisoners held hostage in Israel, along with one of the founders of the Red Army faction imprisoned in West Germany. Now, what would follow was a tragic and a chaotic rescue attempt by the Bavarian state police, attempting to release all the hostages. Now, despite their efforts, the operation ended in disaster. 5 out of the 8 Black September members were killed, but so 2 were also Israeli hostages. Now, the failed mission became a stark reminder of the era's riding tide of terrorism and the devastating impact of the international political conflicts. Now, just few months later, on May 30th, 1972, terror struck once again at Lod International Airport in Tel Aviv. 3 members of the Japanese Red Army arrived at the airport on Air France flight 132 from Paris to Rome to Tel Aviv route. Now, in the baggage claim area, they retrieved Kalashnikov assault rifles and hand grenades hidden in their luggages that had never been seen before. Now, they opened fire and threw grenades at passengers, killing 25 people, most of whom were tourists from Costa Rica, and injuring 78 others. Now, the attack ended when one terrorist was captured while the other 2 died, one accidentally shot by his colleague and the other perishing after landing on a hand grenade. Now, this incident underscored the unpredictable and international nature of terrorism during the era, leaving the lasting scars of those affected, further fueling the climate of fear and insecurity around the globe. Now, the horror continued on May 14, 1974, when 3 members of the Democratic Front of Liberation of Palestine infiltrated Israel from Lebanon. They soon attacked a van, killing 2 Israeli Arab women and injuring a third, before entering an apartment building in Malot, where they killed a couple and their 4-year-old son. From there, they stormed the native Ner Elementary School in Malot, where in the early hours of 15th May, where they took more than 115 people hostage, including 105 children. Now, the majority of the hostages were 14 to 16-year-old students from a high school in Safad on a pre-military field trip. Now, the hostage takers issued their demand for the release of 23 Palestinian prisoners and 3 others from Israel jails, threatening to kill the students if their demands were not met. Now, although Israel initially agreed, the captors failed to receive an unexpected coded message for Damascus. Now, minutes before the 1800 deadline set for executing the hostages, the elite unit commandos of the Israeli army stormed the building. Now, in the ensuing chaos, the terrorists used grenades and automatic weapons to kill the hostages. Ultimately, 25 hostages, including 22 children, were killed, and 68 others were injured. Now, this attack became another tragic chapter in the escalating violence, painting a horrifying picture of an era marked by unprecedented attack and loss. Now, the string of violent events continued with a horrifying incident on June 27, 1976. Air France Flight 139 took off from Tel Aviv, carrying 246 passengers, predominantly Jewish and Israeli passengers, along with a crew of 12 members. Now, after a stopover in Athens, where an additional 58 passengers boarded, including 4 hijackers, the plane was set off for France. Now, just after takeoff, it was hijacked by 2 Palestinians from the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine external operation and 2 Germans, Wilfried Boyce and Bridget Kuhlmann, from the German Revolutionary Zerling. Now, the hijackers diverted the flight to Benghazi, Libya, where it was held for several hours to refuel. Now, during this time, they released a British-born Israeli citizen, Patricia Mattel, who pretended to have a miscarriage to secure her release. Now, the plane finally left Benghazi and more than 24 hours after its original departure, landed at Entebbe International Airport in Uganda. Now, while the news of the hijacking reached the Israeli Premier Yitzhak Rabin, he swiftly dispatched the Israeli Defense Forces unit to the Ben Gurion Airport in Tel Aviv, preparing for a possibility that the hijackers' plane would return to Israel. Now, the situation was escalating and the world watched as the drama unfolded, adding another layer to the complex and dangerous atmosphere of the time. Now, at Entebbe, the 4 hijackers were joined at least by 4 others, supported by the forces from the Ugandan army, which was led by Idi Amin Dada. Now, the hijackers transferred the passengers to the transit hall of the disused former airport terminal, where they kept them under guard for following days. Now, Idi Amin Dada visited the hostages almost on a daily basis, updating them on developments and promising them to use his efforts to negotiate for their release. Now, as the tension escalated, the world watched with a bated breath, waiting to see how this latest act of terrorism would unfold and what it would mean for the international relations moving forward. So on June 28th, a hijacker from the Popular Front for Liberation of Palestine external operation stepped forward to issue a declaration, laying out a series of demands. In addition to the demands was a staggering ransom of $5 million in safe release of the aircraft. Now, in addition to the demand, they demanded for the liberation of 53 Palestinians and pro-Palestinian militants, 40 of whom were imprisoned in Israel. Now, the tension escalated as they threatened to begin executing hostages if their demands were not made by July 1, 1976. Now, the ultimatum sent shockwaves around the world, intensifying the urgency of a resolution, leaving everyone on the edge of the fate that the hostages would live. So on June 29th, the situation took a chilling turn. The Ugandan soldiers, under the orders of the hijackers, created an entrance hole by demolishing a wall next to the crowded waiting area. With the path cleared, the hijackers ordered the Israeli hostages, including those with dual citizenship, to separate themselves from the others and move into the adjacent room. Now, adding to the tension, they also forced 5 non-Israeli hostages, 2 of whom were ultra-Orthodox Jewish couples from US and Belgium, along with a French resident from Israel, to join the group of the Israelis. Now, the segregation heightened the stakes for everyone involved, making it clear that the hijackers were determined to send a powerful message. Now, on June 30th, the hijackers made a significant move, releasing 48 hostages from the crowded terminal. Now, this group primarily consisted of elderly and sickly passengers, along with mothers and children who were chosen for their vulnerability. They were flown out of Entebbe on a chartered Air France Boeing 747, while 1 passenger required treatment and was taken to hospital on that day. Now, the following day, after the Israeli government indicated its willingness to enter negotiations, the hostage takers decided to extend the deadline to noon of July 4th. So in a gesture of goodwill, they released another group of 100 non-Israeli captives who were also flown to Paris shortly. However, 106 hostages remained at Entebbe International Airport, including 12 members of the Air France crew who steadfastly refused to abandon their fellow passengers.
Were you frightened at all, or were any of the passengers frightened? I wasn't in the beginning. I was getting a bit frightened towards the end, because at that moment we didn't know what we were doing. And obviously they didn't know what they wanted themselves. We were going to find, obviously, a shortage of time, and we didn't have enough fuel. We knew that. We couldn't go anywhere where they said we were going to. And but by the time we landed in Entebbe, I don't think we were that much frightened, although the sight of the Ugandan army isn't a very pleasant sight either.
Tell me, was anyone manhandled at all?
No, none at all. None at all. In fact, the whole thing went in a rather cordial atmosphere. I must say the hijacker had manners. He was apparently concerned about our condition and our state. He said, don't.
Now, in the 10 weeks leading up to the raid, Israel explored every possible political avenue to secure the release of the hostages. Now, many reports suggest that the Israeli government even was willing to consider releasing the Palestinian prisoners if it meant averting a military confrontation. Now, meanwhile, a retired IDF officer named Baruch Balev, who had a long-standing personal relationship with Idi Amin Dada, was enlisted to help. Now, at the cabinet's request, he placed numerous phone calls to Idi Amin Dada, desperately trying to negotiate the hostages to be freed, but nothing came to his avail. Now, the Israeli government also reached out to the United States, asking them to relay a message to the Egyptian President Anwar el-Sadat, urging him to intercede with Idi Amin on their behalf. Now, as the clock ticked down, the Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin and the Defense Minister Shimon Peres found themselves at a stalemate, arguing over how to respond. Now, Rabin leaned towards meeting the hijackers' demand, while Peres vehemently opposed the approach, fearing that it would encourage further acts of terrorism. Now, the tensions within the Israeli leadership mirrored the urgency of the situation unfolding in Entebbe, with their lives hanging in balance. Now, as the clock ticked down to the deadline of July 1st, the Israeli government made a pivotal move, proposing to negotiate an extension to the hijackers until July 4th. Now, Idi Amin, eager to accommodate this, agreed to the delay, allowing him to embark on a diplomatic trip to Port Louis, Mauritius, where he would officially transfer the chairmanship of the Organization of African Unity to the Mauritius President Sewa Sagur Ramgolang. Now, the extension was a crucial turning point, granting the Israeli forces time they desperately needed to organize a rescue mission. Now, on July 3rd at 6:30 p.m., the Israeli government convened and approved a daring rescue operation, with Major General Yukutiel Adam and Brigadier General Dan Shomrom presenting their plan. Now, Shomrom was appointed as the operations commander, ready to lead the charge in the high-stakes situation. As the crisis unfolded, various diplomatic efforts were underway to negotiate the hostages' release. Now, the classified documents revealed that the Egyptian President Anwar el-Sadat attempted to mediate discussions with both the Palestinian Liberation Organization leader and Amin himself. Now, the Palestinian leader chairman Yasser Arafat had dispatched his political aide Hani el-Hassan as a special envoy to negotiate with the hijackers and Amin. However, the PLO and the hijackers steadfastly refused to meet with him, leaving the fate of the hostages hanging in balance as the clock counted down to the impending rescue operation. Now, when the Israeli authorities faced difficulties in negotiating a political solution during the 1976 Entebbe hostage crisis, they turned to a military response as the only visible option. Now, Lieutenant Colonel Joshua Shani, the lead pilot of the operation, revealed that in the early hours of the rescue plan involved deploying naval commandos via Lake Victoria to reach Entebbe Airport, which was located near the lake shores. Now, the commandos would have navigated their rubber boat, launched an assault to neutralize the hijackers and free the hostages, then request a safe passage from Idi Amin, the president of Uganda, in return. However, this approach would eventually be dismissed due to the time constraints and the intelligence report that Lake Victoria was populated with Nile crocodiles, posing a significant risk to the operation. Now, the plan evolved into what became to be known as the Operation Entebbe, or Operation Thunderbolt, a daring and complex military raid that successfully rescued 102 of the 106 hostages. Now, Amon Biran, who served as the intelligence officer for the Entebbe mission, later disclosed that challenges were faced during the preparation of the raid. One of the major issues was the lack of reliable intelligence on the precise layout of the Entebbe Airport, where the hostages were being held. Now, additionally, uncertainties surrounded the exact location of the hostages within the airport and whether the building had been booby-trapped with explosives. Now, these unknowns added significant risk to the operation and complicated the planning efforts, as the team needed to consider multiple scenarios without detailed or up-to-date information on the target location. Now, the success of the Entebbe raid required cooperation from at least one of the regional governments to enable the complex logistics of the operation. Now, the Israeli government secured assistance from Kenya, gaining permission from the Israeli Defense Forces to cross Kenyan airspace and use the Nairobi airport, today known as the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport, as a refueling stop. Now, this pivotal support was influenced by Brooks Mackenzie, a Kenyan Minister of Agriculture, who convinced the President Jomo Kenyatta to allow the Mossad to gather intelligence and facilitate logistical needs for their mission. Now, Mackenzie's role was facilitated by Sir Maurice Oldfield, the then head of the MI-16, who connected the Mossad with Mackenzie due to his long-standing association as an MI-16 contact. Now, the Ugandan's ambassador to Lesotho, Isaac Lumago, reportedly had discussions among the Kenyan Air Force officers about the Israeli compensation for the Kenya's assistance in the Entebbe raid and communicated these details to the Uganda's commander, Isaac Maliamungu. However, Maliamungu is said to have dismissed this intelligence as Garcia, meaning that this was rubbish, and they took no action. Now, despite this, it is believed that the Ugandan President Idi Amin eventually received a warning from Lumago, and he may have been apprehensive about the repercussion if his troops had engaged with the Israeli forces. So consequently, he allegedly ordered the Ugandan army not to fire at the Israeli aircraft should an attack occur. Now, the Mossad gathered critical intelligence about the hostages situation in Entebbe, including the number of hijackers and the Ugandan military involvement, using reports from the hostages released in Paris. Now, additionally, the Israeli Defense Forces leveraged the expertise of the Israeli construction firm, which had been involved in building the original airport terminal where the hostages were being held. Now, this collaboration allowed the IDF to create a detailed partial replica of the terminal to aid in the meticulous planning of the rescue operation. Now, this realistic preparation contributed to the success of the Operation Entebbe. Now, the Israeli task force that conducted the Entebbe raid began their journey from the Sharm el-Sheikh. Now, to maintain stealth, the aircraft flew at a very low altitude of approximately 30 meters above sea level over the Red Sea to avoid detection by radar systems belonging to Egypt, Sudanese, and the Saudi Arabian forces. Now, once they approached the southern exit of the Red Sea, the C-130 Hercules transported planes changed course southwards and crossed into the Ethiopian airspace, staying west of Djibouti. They then maneuvered towards the point of northeast of Nairobi, Kenya, and thereafter proceeded to west of the African Rift Valley and above Lake Victoria, and there they were in Uganda. Now, the two Boeing 707 jets accompanied the Israeli cargo planes during the Entebbe raid. One of these aircrafts carried medical facilities and landed at Jomo Kenyatta International Airport in Nairobi, Kenya, to be prepared for potential casualties resulting from the operation. Now, the second Boeing 707, which had General Yukitel Adam, the operations commander, on the board, maintained a position circling over the Entebbe International Airport to oversee and support the mission as it unfolded. Now, the Israeli forces landed at the Entebbe Airport on 3rd July at 2300 IST time. With the cargo bay doors already open for rapid deployment, the first plane landed and encountered a ditch due to the uncertainty of the airport's exact layout. Now, the commandos used a black Mercedes resembling President Idi Amin Dada along with Land Rovers in hope of bypassing the Ugandan security under the guise of Amin's motorcade. As they moved towards the terminal, two Ugandan soldiers, recognizing that Amin had recently acquired a white Mercedes, told the vehicles to stop. Although the plan was to ignore the Ugandans since they were considered unlikely to interfere at the stage, the commandos engaged with silenced pistols, killing the soldiers in the process. Now, this response was not in line with the original orders. Now, when an Israeli in one of the accompanying Land Rovers fired an unsuspecting rifle, the concern grew and the noise might alert the hijackers prematurely, prompting the assault team to hasten their advance on the terminal. The Israeli commandos left their vehicles and rushed in the terminal where the hostages were being held, adjacent to the runway. Entering the building, they announced, "Stay down, stay down. We are Israeli soldiers," in both Hebrew and English to ensure that the hostages would not be caught in crossfire. Now, despite this effort, confusions led to tragic outcomes. Jean-Jacques Moimoni, a 19-year-old French immigrant to Israel, stood up and was mistakenly shot by one of the Israeli soldiers who thought that he was a hijacker. Now, Pascal Cohen, another hostage aged 52, was also fatally wounded by the commandos in a gunfire. Now, one of the hostages recounted that only one of the hijackers, Wilfred Boyce, entered the room during the raid. Although he initially aimed his rifle at the hostages, he soon instructed them to seek cover in the restaurant. It was later noted that Boyce only fired at the Israeli soldiers and did not shoot at the hostages before he was killed by the commandos. Now, after the raid on the Entebbe Airport, the Israeli assault team quickly returned to the aircraft to load the hostages while facing resistance from the Ugandan soldiers who opened fire. Now, during the gunfight, the Ugandan forces, including those in the airport control tower, targeted at the Israeli troops. Now, the Israeli commandos suppressed this fire with machine guns and a rocket-propelled grenade. Now, tragically, Yonatan Netanyahu, the operations commander, was killed in this exchange. Now, according to some reports, the soldier who shot Netanyahu was related to Idi Amin Dada and was subsequently killed by the return fire. Now, the entire operation took about 53 minutes, with the actual assault lasting about 30 minutes. The raid resulted in all the 7 hijackers being killed, along with around 50 Ugandan soldiers. Now, additionally, the Israeli forces destroyed 11 Soviet-built MiG-17 and MiG-21 jet fighters of the Ugandan army in order to prevent a potential pursuit. Now, of the 106 hostages, 3 were killed during the raid, and approximately 10 were wounded. The remaining 102 rescued hostages were flown to Israel via Nairobi, Kenya. Now, after the Entebbe raid, Idi Amin's reaction was one of fury and defiance. He claimed that he could have retaliated against the Israelis had he had known about the impending operation. Now, in the aftermath, the Ugandan military personnel faced severe consequences for their perceived failures during the raid. Isaac Maliamungu, a senior Ugandan military officer, ordered the arrest of 14 Ugandan soldiers suspected for collaborating with the Israelis, executing 12 of them personally at the Makindye police barracks.
I've been telephoned several telephone calls from Tel Aviv talking to me since I cut off relationship with Israel because of the hostages. But I wanted to tell you that it was not my intention to tell the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine to bring the hostages to Uganda, but I accept to land there for the humanitarian ground. And also, there was... And it is the first time for the history of the hijackers in the world. The hostages removed from the airplane and put in comfortable place, which never happened anywhere.
Now, Dora Bloch, a 74-year-old Israeli national who had also held a British citizenship, became a tragic victim after the Entebbe raid. She had been hospitalized at Mulago Hospital in Kampala due to choking on a chicken bone, but after the raid, she was murdered on orders of the Ugandan president Idi Amin Dada. Now, reports indicate that the Ugandan army officers dragged her from the hospital bed and killed her, likely as means to eliminate any witnesses or prevent interventions from her medical staff. Now, Henry Chamber, who served as the Uganda's attorney and the Minister of Justice during Amin regime, testified before the Ugandan Human Rights Commission that Bloch had been executed on orders of Amin. Her body was later discovered near a sugar plantation after the fall of Idi Amin's government during the Uganda-Tanzanian War. Now, the circumstances highlighted the brutality of Idi Amin regime and the length to which the government went to silence dissent and protect itself from scrutiny. Now, on May 24, 1978, Bruce Mackenzie, Kenya's former agricultural minister, died when a bomb attached to his aircraft exploded shortly after takeoff. Now, this instance is widely believed to have been orchestrated by Ugandan President Idi Amin Dada in retaliation to Kenya's involvement in the Entebbe operation and Mackenzie's role in facilitating intelligence gathering for the Israelis prior to the raid, but later was assassinated on Idi Amin's orders. Now, some theories suggest that Mackenzie may have not been the target and that the bomb could have been meant from some other individual on board of the plane. Now, following his death, Israel honored Mackenzie by planting a forest in his name in Israel, highlighting the international implications of the events surrounding the Entebbe raid and its aftermath. Now, the United Nations Security Council met on 9th July 1976 to address a complaint from the chairman of the Organization of African Unity, which accused Israel of an act of aggression following the Entebbe raid. Now, during this session, both the Israeli ambassador Shem Herzog and the Ugandan Foreign Minister Juma Oris Abdallah were allowed to participate in discussion without voting. Now, the UN Secretary General Kurt Waldheim described the raid as a serious violation of the sovereignty of a member state, acknowledging the complex issues surrounding the international terrorism and the necessitated broader global response. Now, Abdallah claimed that the situation was nearing a peaceful resolution before Israel's intervention, while Herzog accused Uganda of complicity in the hijacking incident and proposed a resolution that they condemned hijacking and similar acts without specifically condemning either nations involved, while also calling for respect of state sovereignty and protection of the civil aviation. However, this resolution failed to pass due to the abstentions of the key members. Now, on July 4, 2016, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu returned to Uganda to commemorate the 40th anniversary of the Entebbe raid. Now, during this visit, he brought with him a replica of the aircraft that was used in the successful rescue mission at the Entebbe Airport in 1976.
With your permission, sir, I'd like to say first a few words in Hebrew. We have gathered here to mark an event that inspired the world and lifted the spirits of my people. At Entebbe, international terrorism suffered a stinging defeat. The rescue mission proved that good can prevail over evil, that hope can triumph over evil, over fear. Today, savage terror is once again sweeping the world. We must recognize that the battle against it is indivisible. When terrorism succeeds in one place, it spreads to other places. And when terrorism is defeated anywhere, it is weakened everywhere. This is why Entebbe was more than an Israeli victory. It was a victory for all humanity in the fight against those who threaten our common civilization.
Now, this event was significant not only for its historical importance, but also for the ongoing diplomatic relationship between Uganda and Israel. Now, the commemorative ceremony took place at the Entebbe International Airport, where the original operation had occurred. Now, Netanyahu's visit included paying tribute to the bravery of the Israeli commandos who carried out the mission and honoring the hostages who were rescued. Now, if you found this video informative and engaging, don't forget to give this video a like, share, and subscribe to help the channel grow. This has been Regan for Uganda in History, and see you in another video.